You're listening to the PR Wind Down Podcast, the show for public relations professionals who are ready to see real change in the PR industry. We are your hosts, April White and Laura Schooler. Let's get ready to wind down.
Okay, so here's our horror story for the day. April and Laura. I need to start here by saying I am a level-headed person usually, but I'm having regrets over an email I sent about 6 hours ago. Basically, I totally unleashed on my boss, and the boss has not responded. Note, this is the boss, all caps, aka head honcho, aka owner of this PR firm.
Did somebody yell at you today, April?
Thankfully, no.
So it's not about you. Okay.
Thankfully, this is not. No, this was not me. I did not get an email from anybody mad. I have been overworked at this place for like months. The pandemic knocked this agency around, and we are all so tired. I've been pulling insane hours. We all have for weeks to try to keep our accounts afloat. I care about this place and these people, but we are being ground into a PR pulp here. My teams are so overworked, over-servicing, overwhelmed, and today I decided I am over everything. Basically, the team I manage has been working on this massive report for a high-paying client, following the direction of our usual client contact. A whole week of late nights later, and to the detriment of deadlines on our other accounts, and the client CEO trashed the entire thing and wanted it redone by tomorrow. My boss saw the request first and just replied with, "Of course, we'll do that." There is no way it's possible. So I fired off an email basically accusing my boss of being completely oblivious to the hours of work, poor direction from the client, and general state of despair this team is in. I have been starting to look for new jobs, but I wasn't going to move on until I'd landed something. I have never had an outburst like this in my life, and I kind of shocked myself here. Boss saw the email, opened it, and has not said one word. What would you do right now if you were me? I realize I probably will be fired by the time you get this question, but it feels weirdly cathartic to write this. I think I am the whore in this story, right? Thank you and good night.
Oh my God. I kind of want to know who this is.
I know. I mean,
who they're dealing with.
It feels so immediate. Oh boy. I mean, I guess you have a couple of options. If the email's already sent and you still stand behind what you said in the email, then I think you have to let it ride until you get a response. If you're having remorse about what you said or the way you said it, or if you're feeling like maybe it wasn't exactly what you wanted to say, I think you could follow up and say, hey, I'm sorry I had sort of a heated moment. Can we have a phone call for me to just chat through with you and see if I can handle this more professionally? Like, I think, as an agency owner, if I got a heated email and then somebody had a change of heart and came back and wanted to say, hey, I kind of had a bad moment and I didn't really mean everything I said, I would never hold that against them, right? Be more than happy, like, okay, give me take two or whatever, I mean, the likelihood that the boss just doesn't have time to deal with it is pretty high. I doubt it's that they're that upset. It might be that they're trying to figure out what to say and when they have time to actually say it, or when they have time to connect with you, because if they're as busy as I am, then it's not that they're sitting there stewing about it. It's just that they're like, I don't have a break in meetings for 5 hours to even finish reading this carefully.
Right.
So it's probably less that the person is like spending 6 hours getting angry over the email you sent, and more likely that they're just don't have time to deal with it.
Right. So they're so overworked, but I think it goes back to, and this is probably easier said than done, this is about, on everybody's side, not sort of managing the issue ahead of time. If you knew there was this huge thing that was going on, you should have been like, talking to the big boss about it. If you knew that you and the team were working, 12, 15 hours a day for weeks, you should have talked to the boss about it. When, the email came back from the client, like all, annoyed, and the boss saying, sure, we'll do that, probably should have, if you're in person, gone into their office, or if not, picked up the phone and talked about this. Like there was a lot of opportunities, I think, ahead of time to cut this off at the pass. Now, part of that may have been that, it ends up being that you just can't tolerate it anymore and you're done. I'm not saying, that you have to be the good silent worker and do what you're told to do or whatever, but it has now come to a head where, like, there is no time for anybody to really deal with it in the right way. I also have found there's definitely been jobs that I've been like, oh my God, this stinks, this sucks, I need another job. I rarely have been able to get another job when I'm furious about my current job. And I think maybe it might be coincidence, but it also might be sort of if you want to get a little bit cosmic about it, the energy that I'm bringing, whether you're aware of it or not, just isn't the right energy. Even if you do get a job, it will likely be out of the frying pan and into the fire.
If you're running from something, you are inevitably going to create a new situation.
Not that different than the bad one you're in.
No. I
Right.
mean, it's the same with relationships, right? You're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a bad relationship. Let me escape this horrible person and I'm going to go flee off to this person.
Run into the arms of the next loser. Yeah.
And you're just going to create the same pattern. So
Yeah.
I think it's true also with jobs where it's like, if you are running from something because you're mistreated or whatever, it's like you're gonna go straight into the same energy where you're mistreated again.
Right.
I think what you're saying is like two things. One is managing yourself and your own reaction, and then making a level-headed decision about whether or not you need to make some move because there's no way to rectify it, or do you just need to manage up better, or do you need to have a dialogue and say, hey, I'm feeling really overworked and I was really happy here before, but I'm not really happy right now and I want to be. I believe in this agency. I like my clients. What can we do to rectify this, right? Because it's like just have like an adult, professional, responsible conversation where you're like taking ownership of the experience in addition to asking for a way to fix it, and or suggesting solutions to fix it.
I was going to say, bring some ideas to the table about, what you can do for the team, what you can do for yourself, what you can do for the client, and approach the big boss that way. I understand that a lot of times you're like, I don't even care. Like, I can't even muster the energy to do that, et cetera, et cetera. But I promise you that will probably not benefit you in the way that we just discussed.
Yeah.
You just want to throw a tantrum, like, life doesn't really work that way.
It's inefficient. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because you have to get yourself right before you can make a difference in your world and change your circumstance. Your perspective has to change, and you have to understand what role you're playing in the situation.
The person who wrote this to us is probably not in love with the answers that we're giving right now. I know I wouldn't be if I was in their state of mind.
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
Because it doesn't seem very empathetic or sympathetic or like, down with the man or whatever. But they were asking for our recommendations on what they should do now. They wrote this crazy, quote, crazy email to their boss. The boss hasn't replied. I think they need to go in the boss's office or pick up the phone. But like we said, with ideas, not with complaints. I mean, you can give a reality check. That's not a complaint. But you also need to say, these are the challenges. These are why they are challenges.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we should do to rectify it. Or if you really don't know, because you feel you've exhausted all avenues, you lay out the challenges and say, I would really appreciate your senior advice as to what we should do here, because I don't think trying to make the team stay here until midnight tonight to do this again is going to end up being beneficial to anybody.
The issue
We're
with the
not going to
client.
do the right work. Maybe you guys need to call the client and have them, specify exactly what they're not jiving with. You don't want to just keep trying, doing the same thing over and over.
The definition of insanity.
Well,
I think you're right. I think if you want to resolve the situation and stay there, then you have to do what you're saying. I think if you're resigned to the fact that you just need to run away from this because you just can't deal with it right now and you don't care if you get fired, then you just wait.
but I don't think that in this economy,
Yeah.
that big boss is going to fire you in the middle of a huge client project.
No, I don't either.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't quit, but you need to get in a different, you need to jump the
headspace.
track. Yeah.
Yeah.
For your own benefit.
Yeah, I agreed. Okay. I think we put a bow on that. The next segment is things I should have been trained on. And today's topic is how to handle over servicing at an agency, which is interesting because it dovetails nicely with that horror story.
So in your mind, does over servicing directly dovetail with hours spent on the account and like tracking the economics of the retainer?
Primarily, yeah.
Okay.
It is that, but it's also, I think in some cases, it can be mental over servicing. I think that some clients require, if maybe it's not the number of hours, but it's the amount of brain space they're taking up and demanding because of their expectations of immediate responses, and they're changing their priorities every other day, or now they want to release about this, or suddenly the new metrics that they want because of the new team in place is this instead. And I think a lot of times you can feel like you're over servicing a client even if the number of hours isn't really the issue because of that.
Right. More like the type of things that you're being asked to do, not the amount of time.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that kind of stopping, starting, changing directions can be a lot more damaging to the relationship and the team's rapport with the client, and even just their wanting to service the client in a meaningful way.
Right.
Than the amount of time.
Right. Because it's very demoralizing to be like, we need you to do the tracking sheet this way, not that way. Like things that are not really consequential and that don't have to happen now to the real progress of the client.
Yeah.
And it's usually because they're kind of like OCD, which I understand. I kind of am too. But what the media tracker looks like, on the third Tuesday at 10 a.m., unless you explain why, we don't need to get into a big thing about stopping doing the work to, reorganize the media tracker when it's not the end of the month or even the end of the week.
Yeah.
Unless you come to your agency and say, oh my God, the CEO of the company just called me into a meeting and I have to have this now. That's one thing. But just because you do this now kind of thing, it's not helpful.
Right. In terms of how to handle this, because that's really the question here, right? Things we should have been trained on. I always keep harping on our point system that I have in place for this exact reason. So that's one thing that I recommend, but I know basically no other agencies do. I think that it's important to have a candid conversation or a heart-to-heart between either the agency owner or the account lead, the senior account lead, and the client, and say, hey, we really need to come into alignment on what the priorities are here, because with the team, I want to be conscientious of using your budget to maximize results. And if we are having this kind of a change every 2 days or every 2 weeks, it's very difficult to get momentum to actually make a difference and make an impact. And I just want to make sure that we're spending your money wisely. People always appreciate that kind of candor. If you're actually genuinely trying to help them
Right.
and you're trying to make the most of their spend and their investment, they can't really be angry with you about that. That's my advice on that. We do have Angela in the waiting room. For some reason, I have Wingman and Angela, so I'm going to admit both, but I don't know why there's two people.
She needs a wingman.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Sorry to make you wait. We were just wrapping a little segment and we got carried away.
Oh, no worries. No worries. How are you guys?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
So who's the wingman? Is that
Oh,
you?
yeah, I can kick him out. Hold on. He's just a bot, like
Oh,
Fireflies.
okay. Oh, okay. Right. Fine.
Totally fine.
We just didn't
So-
know if it was an actual wingman.
Fireflies is a better name than Wingman, though. Doesn't pose as many questions.
That is true. All right. Well, I'm going to let Laura do a formal introduction and then we can get into it here.
Awesome.
So today we have Angela Bonnici. She is the Chief Publicity Officer at Super Connector Media, where she was the first employee and has been responsible for growing the PR agency to a multi-million-dollar entity in less than 1 year. Angela has 15 years of professional experience and has worked in both public relations and strategic communications for companies in various sectors. And she is here to shoot the breeze with us. You have had many different jobs in many different agencies, and I think maybe a couple of in-house roles too. What in all of these years have you found to be the key to public relations?
Wow, that is a loaded question.
Go.
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. This is
Sure.
so awesome. Gosh, the key to public relations, in my experience with big companies, small companies, startups, entrepreneurs, book launches, the key is finding the story and the narrative, honestly, and always remembering that the key takeaway needs to be the audience. And what they're going to take away from, whatever the segment or the placement is. And then it's our responsibility to weave in our client or the client's responsibility to weave in their own narrative. But we really always have to think of what the story is, what the timely angle is, and how we can help more people and help our, target audience.
That's a pretty good answer for not
I
knowing
mean,
what I was going to throw the big question at you.
I was going to say, you knocked that out of the park with that was not an
Oh,
easy
you're
question.
hired.
Thank you. I'm like sweating.
So funny. I want to know how in the world you are growing an agency at that rate.
It's absurd. It's been a wild ride. So I think one of the keys to our success has been our co-founders have huge networks. They have influential Instagram platforms that they've leveraged in order to bring in entrepreneurs that we teach them how to do their own PR. And because of that element of the company, which is very different than most agencies don't have events that have a teaching platform. And because of that, and because of the brand that they've been able to create as coaches, it's given us a leg up in terms of leads that come in, because anyone that they meet, anyone that they speak in front of is usually, a lot of people are like, well, that's great. Thanks for teaching me how to do PR, but I don't want to be a publicist. Like, can you just do it for me? And so,
Smart.
well, actually we have an agency too. So sure, we can do it for you. So that's been really the key to our success, I would say.
That's really smart. Yeah.
Interesting.
you.
Are there certain industries that you're in?
We're generalists for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Our team has experience across B2B, consumer, book launches, entrepreneurs, products everywhere. I would say our sweet spot is really that like high level entrepreneur to personal brands to startup to small business that might be looking to go public, or they're in their very early stages of investing. We don't work with like bigger companies, so sort of our niche is in that like entrepreneurial / startup space.
Yep.
That's interesting. Do you find that that's a hard space to have the amount of clients to stay steady? Because I find startups are very volatile financially.
Right.
And so if you have 50 startup clients, you need to have a minimum of 25 prospects in the wings, because the likelihood that half of them are going to just drop off like flies at some point for unexpected reasons that have nothing to do with your performance is pretty high.
Right. Supply chain and financial and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're speaking to my pain points. It's 100% true. We originally started with 12-month contracts, and we found that that was really challenging, especially
Mhm.
for the most attractive clients are the ones that are doing big things that are taking a lot of risk, right?
Mhm.
So they're changing the world, but there's a lot of risk involved. It really might take off or it might completely fall flat. It certainly has been a wild ride in terms of finding a formula of, okay, if we take on this person, what is our risk of them, not surviving in 3 months, 6 months?
You had 12-month contracts, but you've adjusted that what to 6
Oh,
months?
yes, 6 months now, which I think gives people a little bit of, they're not committing to a year, which for many small companies is a really long time. But
Mhm.
it also still gives us time, as you ladies know, it takes time and momentum to get results. So it gives us enough time to kind of, our goal being to knock it out of the park and get
Mhm.
so much momentum by 6 months that they can't possibly stop there. 3 months, no time to create any momentum or anything. So I fought very hard for that 6-month contract, because it's like anything under that is really challenging to get, the caliber and quality and quantity of results that are really going to, keep them around and keep them wanting more.
It's true. It's really hit or miss at the 3 month mark.
Yep.
Have
100%.
you had clients that like begged you, or maybe they didn't beg, to go on pause, like after 2 or 3 months, like they ran out of funding or the funding didn't come through?
Yep.
Yeah. Like we
We
won't let
do.
you out of the contract, but we'll let you pause for 2 months and we'll come back, in January or whatever.
What I found is we don't do pauses, just for the sheer fact that the probability of them returning, it never works out. Like, essentially, the reason we do that too is that they've obviously been granted a specific price point, and by the time maybe they come back, our price point has changed. So if
Yeah.
we, don't pause them but say we'd love for you to come back, it will just be at our
Mhm.
market rate. We have had people that, when we've ended a contract, re-sign a year later when they have more funding and things like
Okay.
that, which is really interesting. The pause ones never seem to work out very well for us.
Right. Did you let them out of their contract or or what? Like, how do you, I mean, if they've signed a 6-month contract and then after 2 months, they're like, okay, I
Yep.
got to pause. What do you do?
Yeah, so there's like a 45-day clause. So if they give
Okay.
us 45 days, this way we're protecting our next month's revenue. And also, one of the things that I feel like I've found throughout the years is that if it's not working for them, it's probably not working very well for us either. And
Right.
it's like I always find that the 10% of challenging clients take up 90% of my team's time, or we
Mhm.
can replace them with someone that, we can give the equal amount of resources to, and we'll actually have great results. So,
Right. So ultimately, you make them pay for an additional month and a half.
yep, I would say 99% of the time we'll do the 45 days. Sometimes they'll be like, do we really have to do the 45 days? It's like, yeah, you really do. Like
Right. But
this.
we
Still have to
staffed
pay for it.
this. We, projected our financials. We built a
Yeah.
team. We, whatever. We can't just pull the plug on it. We're running a business
Right.
here too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
We have bills to pay. We have people to pay. We have staff. We have salaries. We have,
Right.
you know, like
Exactly. Exactly.
it's not something we can just float until you get us the money for all the work we did.
Have either of you ever done the like use it or lose it? I guess it's sort of a pay up front scenario, you know, pay 3 months up front, pay 6 months up front, and we'll work, towards that. And if you end up not launching or if you don't use us, then we're keeping the money and sayonara or whatever. I've heard sometimes people do that. And usually I think it's more like when somebody gets hired as a contractor, you hire me for 6 months. If for whatever reason the project gets delayed, like I'm not just going to sit around and like wait and wait and wait and keep being your like on pause basic, going back to that, employee for a year when I was just agreeing to sign up for 6 months. So pay me up front and I'll do all the work that I'm supposed to do for 6 months. And if on your end you haven't met, your timeline goals, that's not really my problem.
I've done that mostly for projects, but it's funny you say that because I just have a prospect that told me that they want to pay for 6 months up front before the end of the year for tax reasons.
Hmm.
But normally I don't do that unless it is a project,
Right.
and I'm taking on the project in the hopes that the client will become a fruitful retainer client later.
Right.
And it's just like an opportunity to get our foot in the door.
So one of the things we do is if you pay in full, you get basically like a month off. So if you pay, we don't do it for 6 months, we do it for 12-month contracts.
Hmm.
So if you're willing to commit to 12 months, we'll give you your 12th month free essentially.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And the great news is when we're closing people in December, sometimes they'll opt to do that because of the same reason you mentioned, April, the tax reason. So
How do you track hours if somebody pays a year in advance to make sure? We were just talking before you came on, over servicing clients, not only hours wise, but also like mental space of them asking to do things that aren't really so important, but like the whole team spending hours on, reformatting media coverage
KPIs.
documents or, stuff like that. That's not really that imperative really to their success.
yeah, I mean, I'd say if you ask me my biggest challenge, it's over servicing for sure. And, I have no problem pushing back, but sometimes, like, in order to get the results that you are promising or you want to deliver,
Right.
I think the key to this is over servicing where it counts. So, to your point about like making media briefing documents or having to redo them or 40 rounds of edits to a press release,
Right.
saying something like, we can certainly take our hours and work on this press release again, or what I think would be more valuable for your money is if we spend that time doing more pitching. It would behoove you to use our expertise in actually just head down pitching the media. And so
Right.
typically when it's positioned that way, it's kind of like, okay, I guess we don't need another 40 rounds of edits.
Right. Or the
Yeah.
the tracking document doesn't need to be done in a new font with 18 colors or right.
Exactly. Oh my
Legible
God.
as it is. Yeah.
That would be a perfect opportunity to upcharge. Be like, you can either
Yes.
have an assistant do this or
Yes.
we can upcharge you.
Well, we actually have a point system in place that helps a lot with over servicing. So we have a thing where your budget is matched to a certain number of points and you get to spend those per month, and the activity is mapped to those points. And then if they decide to make a change in the middle of the month, they either have to scrap something or borrow points from the next month, or we have to retool and say, okay, it's going to be an extra $1,500 or whatever to do that byline. It's also making sure that we're doing a good job with what we're doing, because if you spread us too thin, none of it will be done professionally, and I don't want that for you either. I want to make sure that we're doing the right amount of work for what you're paying. And on the flip side of that, we're going to do the amount of work that's commensurate with your budget, regardless of whether we got the results that we need to make you happy. So we're not going to, I know a lot of agencies will say, oh, we got 5 hits, cash it in for the month, save the money, and they just stop doing work because they don't have to. But we
Yeah.
don't do that. So it's like it works both ways, right? You get the exact amount of work that you're paying for. And if you want more work, no problem. We'll just invoice you more for those points.
Wow, I love that. Is it okay that I'm taking notes?
100%. Yeah.
That's really brilliant. I love that.
Right.
Really.
So and so April has like for a press release, it's whatever 3 points, and for different activities. So she can easily say, well, that you want us to do is this many points, and each point is this many dollars, and that would require, like she said, maybe $1,500 more.
And what's really nice about it is that it empowers the entire team to have those dialogues, because otherwise it can feel like an arbitrary conversation where as an agency owner or the senior account lead, you have to come in and say, hey, we're kind of over servicing you and doing too much, but there was no clear expectation. So
Right.
there was no line in the sand. So suddenly you're just presenting that the team is overworked, but you didn't have any expectations of what the boundaries were in the first place. So even somebody junior can say, hey, our deliverables for the month was this, and this is falling outside of that. So I'm going to need to talk to the team about it. But do you still want us to do all of the things on the list? It doesn't have to be so awkward. It's like,
Oh, good.
yeah.
And it also, then you're not taking time to have the conversation. Like if your team is empowered because it's so cut and dry,
Mm-hmm.
you're not then, getting on a call, and that's like costing more money. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really smart. Wow.
It,
I love
it
that.
it helps a lot. Yeah, and it cuts, to your point, it cuts down on my time of like trying to have these weird uncomfortable conversation, there just aren't uncomfortable conversations. And it also makes it really easy for clients if they have multiple cooks in the kitchen, which can happen, as you know, that if the executive team is suddenly asking for something and the new product person is asking for something and everyone wants a piece of the agency, it's also easier for the client contact to manage their people internally. But you'd think that maybe prospects wouldn't love it, but they do like it. And they like that they understand what they're getting for the money.
I love everything about that. So good. It's so good.
So that's my secret. I'm not trying to keep it to myself because I feel like in general it's just so nice for both parties, right? And I think if the industry had more of this in place, I think it might also up the comfort level in general with people doing PR. And I think there's a really big issue with, clients feeling like they get bamboozled by agencies all the time and they don't know why they didn't get results and why they spent all that money. And it's just this nebulous, kind of scary industry that a lot of people don't trust. And I think the more we can instill trust into the industry, the better. So
It's the April model. You got to coin it. I love it.
Okay, I have a question, Angela. Aside from your current job, what's the best job that you've had?
Ooh, that's a good
Because
one.
of course your current job is the best one.
100%. It truly is. The best job I ever had is probably honestly doing PR for like pro bono for a nonprofit that, I guess that's not really a job, but can I
No,
use
that's keep going with that. Yeah. No, that's that.
I'm involved with the Special Olympics, and we have an annual gala every year. A lot of people were doing like corporate sponsorships and being able to like leverage because they work for JP Morgan or whatever. And like, I'm not in a position to have my company help like sponsor a gala, right?
Right.
So I was thinking of ways that I can be supportive, and why not, use my skill set to help bring value that obviously like a nonprofit's very hard for them to have budget for PR, and was able to get some great coverage of the event and feature stories around some of the athletes of Special Olympics. And I think that was the most rewarding thing because I was able to use a superpower of mine to really do good and feel like really like I'm contributing value in an even bigger way.
love
So
that.
it's a really interesting answer to me because when people ask me that, nobody ever asked me that. When I ask myself that, my my answers would also be either not pro bono work, but like my lowest paying jobs are always the ones that are kind of the most fulfilling to me, or
Yep.
and
So
that's
true.
really interesting.
Thank you.
April's like, no way,
love
man.
that.
I like the jobs that pay the money. No, what about you, April?
My favorite job, I really liked my in-house job at eMusic.
Mm,
It was fun for me because I was able to dovetail my personal passion of music with doing PR.
Right.
And most of the time, I didn't have an opportunity to do that. So it was sort of two separate worlds. And there was something really fun about combining them. I think probably in hindsight, it was when I realized that I was well suited to be entrepreneurial because, as you guys know from doing in house jobs, like it's very different in that you have to carve your own path and your own space and figure out what the priorities are and then put them into action. Nobody is telling you really what to do.
Nobody really
So
knows what you do or
it's just,
cares.
it's like, it's
Right.
on you to figure out how to provide value to the company.
Right. And at an agency, everybody you work with does PR, but when you're inside a company, that's not the case.
But
Yeah.
I did really enjoy that though. I liked the freedom of suddenly, like, oh, I just show up and I do whatever needs to get done. And
Yep.
if that means I work late, I work late. And if it means I'm done at 5, I'm done at 5. And it was a very other kind of experience within
Mhm.
communications, It's like freeing and odd and
You're like an entrepreneur who's getting a regular paycheck on somebody else's dime. It sounds like.
for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember being like, I really need to go to Houston for this event. But I could because I was, the one in charge or, the one that was calling the shots in terms of what was PRable or,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's a really interesting point you make.
Laura, any final questions or should
No,
we?
I was going to ask your famous question.
Oh, let's hear it.
What my famous
Do you have any questions for us? That's what April always
yeah.
asks
I mean,
our,
um,
our guests
yeah,
at the
I mean,
end.
I guess in terms of the industry in general for 2022, what excites you? There's a lot of things that are, the media landscape changes so much. What are some of the things that you think are changing for the better?
That's a great question. Laura, do you want to answer first?
No.
I think at least where I'm headed mentally and even as an agency is I am excited about the opportunities to pair it with some of the digital marketing techniques and things like that that have become more prominent because I feel like if you dovetail those things together with PR, it better showcases for clients the value of PR, which has always been true, but I feel like because of the way that people are embracing digital marketing more, and I think with PR people getting a little more savvy about those parts of the marketing mix, I think there's a really cool opportunity to start putting things together for clients in a way that you're providing a full suite of offering that's going to serve their brand more holistically. And so that's something I'm looking at. I'm super excited about, and I think it's going to be increasingly important with the media landscape changing the way that it is because it's not going to go away, but as you know, things are becoming more and more paid and there's more affiliate marketing that's
Mhm.
associated with PR. And so it's not that I want to water down PR, but I think that there's an opportunity to showcase its strength within the mix more than there has been in the past.
I love that. It's so good.
Jeez.
Great answer.
Okay, good.
I'll hire you too, the two of you. I mean, I have found in the industry that I've been working in most recently that reporters really seem to be moving around a lot. A lot of times keeping their same beat or about relatively their same beat, but not always.
Hmm.
And they're jumping all over the place, especially in the last like 3 to 4 months. And I don't know if that's a function of, the big quit or the grand resignation, but you really got to keep your eyes open on where your key reporters are flitting off to because it's like every week, like major reporters.
Yeah, fascinating. Was there anything else that you want to plug?
No, I mean, this was so fun. You ladies are phenomenal. I hope we can be friends. This was so
Yeah, me too.
We'll be best
fun.
friends.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm
Well,
here.
let's definitely keep in touch. And yeah, I'm sure if you're in New York, Laura would love to hang out.
Yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really impressed with what you've created. And however I can support you guys, please let me know.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, you
Okay,
too.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Ooh, she was like our first guest in a long time who knew just to hang up.
I know. Amazing. So funny.
People are usually like, so you want to hang out for another hour?
Although her wingman is still here.
The wingman. It's good so she'll hear me complimenting her.
Line
So I
up.
wanted to circle back a minute on the overservicing thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
How often do you keep track of hours?
So basically, what we do at the beginning of every month is based on our overhead. And then based on the amount of the retainer, we will
Your
decide.
team.
We have X number of hours for each client based on their budget, based on everyone's hourly rate to spend.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically the team is given hours based on their hourly rate that's commensurate with that budget, the total
Mm-hmm.
budget. So then once a week, the operations team will see what people are logging, but it's also on each employee to let us know if they're approaching hours. So we've gotten a system of monitoring to make sure that the team isn't going way over collectively as well. Because what you don't want also is, even if people are responsible for the hours for the month, you don't want everybody to have spent 75% of their hours in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then nobody has hours for the rest of the month to finish out client requests.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure that happens that last week of the month. But that goes back to maybe I talked about it on our last podcast too. Something that it just sort of bugs me about what I see in PR agency is the almighty month. You have to like work for the month. And like you even said when talking to Angela, like some agencies are like, oh, we already got 5 hits for the month. We're done for the month. And it's like, that's such a strange and transactional way to do a business that's actually not supposed to be transactional. It's about thought leadership and brain power and stuff. And all of a sudden you're like, well, we have 3 hits and it's just like, oh, now you've reduced it to like the month. And that just seems unfortunate to me. And I'm going to try and go back to the laboratory and figure that one out. I understand like on a billing and all of that, like financially it's sort of necessary, but it's sort of a bummer to me too.
It is a bummer, but it is much harder to run an agency like financially responsibly than you would think.
Yeah.
It seems
No,
like,
I know it's a hard one.
And when you're just doing the work and you're not responsible for making sure that the business is afloat and the cash flow is okay and you can pay everyone's salary on time, like these are the kinds of things that suddenly everything shifts on the back end and you go,
Right.
oh my God, now I understand why we can't just do everything the
Wing
client
it.
asks and
Right, right.
wing it, or just like, just be great client service people. I mean, because you do want that, but you also have to do it in a way that's sustainable, because otherwise nobody benefits if the agency crashes and burns. And the thing that's the trickiest is that it's a services industry. So you don't get the economies of scale that you do for a tech company where you can just create something cheaper and cheaper, or it's a SaaS platform that doesn't cost you any more than it costs to get going. And now as many people as you can get to use it, you benefit financially from that. I mean, you're literally doing hourly work
Mm-hmm.
that has to be paid for every hour, and there's no economy of scale. There's no way to just suddenly be more profitable as an agency.
And an hour is 60 minutes and that's not going to change. Yeah.
And so then it just leaves you trying to figure out, how do you do a better job with the amount of budget that clients are giving you so that you maximize efficiencies. And I know there have been some companies that have come up with AI solutions and things like that, but the problem with that is that those solutions are always not custom. I don't think there's really a way around it.
Right.
So then it is
All
just
right.
unfortunately. I mean, obviously I've thought a lot about this and I've
Yeah.
tried to figure it out. I think services.
I just don't like to be confined by the parameters of capitalism.
It'd be great if, money didn't matter, but it people still need to pay bills and
Yeah, no, I just wish
buy
there was
food and
more creative freedom in the industry than there is, because when I was first working at agencies back in the .com days, like the financials were not run very well, and it ended up being the downfall of many a agency.
you don't understand what all goes into the back end until you're doing, because it's a lot of, it's a lot of finance, operations, keeping things running,
Yeah, I guess it's any business or any startup business. You're like the whole legal aspect, the lawsuits and stuff. Like,
and then
God,
there's new business, and how do you have to keep filling the pipeline, and that's
right?
very expensive.
Yeah.
Very, very expensive to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the added challenge of, okay, as soon as you start getting more clients, you have to add staff.
Right.
And they have to be on par with like the caliber of service that you want to provide. There's no way to make it perfect.
Hmm.
So it's
And
just
it's never going to
constantly-
be set. It's always going to change, and you're never going to expect when one client leaves or somebody quits or whatever, right?
Mm-mm. It's just unpredictable. So you can only
So
control it to a degree. But
we've gone from over servicing clients to the unpredictability of running an agency.
yeah, I don't know how we got there.
Now should we move to
News.
how exciting is it that Cardi B is the new creative director of Playboy magazine?
Is that what you want to talk about?
I don't care. There's a few stories here.
Do you want to talk about Chris Como? Is that too much of a bummer?
I'll talk about Chris Cuomo, and then we could also talk about the USPS and Vans because we haven't done one of those like weird brand mashups
The
for
weird
a while.
brand. Yeah.
So so Chris Cuomo was indefinitely suspended, but he has now since been fired.
Yes.
But more information has come out.
So what's the new information?
So he's been fired from CNN, and he's also leaving, which I didn't even know, his Sirius XM radio show.
So he was forced out of Sirius XM after a sexual misconduct claim. And then
Right, so now he's got a sexual misconduct claim. That's why his brother is no longer the governor of New York, and now he's losing his livelihood over the same kind of stuff.
in his tweet, Cuomo added a cryptic message to his quote loyal listeners that said, "I will miss our conversations a great deal, but I look forward to be back in touch with you all in the future." He was fired by CNN on Saturday, 4 days after being suspended over revelations that he secretly tried to help his older brother, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, fight the sexual harassment allegations that forced him from office in August. In announcing his firing, CNN said additional information has come to light, which was later revealed to be an unspecified allegation of sexual misconduct dating to Chris Cuomo's time at ABC. And then Cuomo's spokesperson insisted these anonymous allegations are not true.
Right. Well, I guess we'll be hearing more about that, right, as the days unfold.
Sounds like it. The unfortunate thing, I think, is that it's not helping the media's credibility, which is, I've been doing a lot of research for this webinar I'm doing, and it's like, it is bad. It's very, very bad. The media's credibility is in the shitter. I mean, quite literally, it's bad. And part of the issue that I was reading about and researching is that there are too many of these thought leaders who are associated with media brands. Maybe thought leaders is too kind. They're opinion leaders and people that are very vocal about political partisan issues and things that are then tainting the reputation of the media. And it's almost like we need the news to stay news, and then this opinionated thoughts on things to become something else, right? But unfortunately, it seems like what's happened is there's more and more blurring of lines between what's news and what's opinion, and people are starting to distrust the news altogether as a result because it's conflated. So you have something like this happen, suddenly the reputation of CNN is on the line. So yes, of course, it's Chris Cuomo that's the problem, but everybody in their mind is never going to separate CNN from this situation now. If you have bad eggs like that, that are well-known personalities within the news organizations, it compromises the entire brand.
And that's why they have to get rid of them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So the question is, why didn't they fire him weeks ago or months ago? I mean, why?
Well, because he probably also drums up ratings. So this is the issue. I think you have a duality where you've got media outlets that need somebody to drum up ratings and incendiary commentary that's very opinionated because it draws people's fire and upset and passion and gets them involved. But the more you do that, the less that you actually bolster your credibility as a source of information. I mean, again, it's back to capital forces, right? And that's why people are paying for Substacks, because they want news that they want. But how do you rectify that where you've got people that want information that's unbiased, that's transparent, that doesn't have a lot of market forces that are influencing the way that it's portrayed? How do you make that a financially viable market.
So so basically the whole sexual harassment allegations is to you like just one of the like kind of a small issue in this much bigger issue.
Yeah.
And because people are so inclined to distrust media right now, anybody who comes along to poke a hole in it, sexual harassment allegations seeming to be the big one, is going to be so easy to do or for people to accept because the regard that people have for the media and people in the media is like zilch. So like, of course they did
gone.
that. Right. Of course they're gross. Of course they're,
And nobody's
preying on you.
surprised. None of this is
No.
none of this is even news, to be honest. It's
Right.
just it's par for the course, which is the issue. That's the
So
issue.
is that like, the downfall of society at large too?
Yes, at the risk of sounding, really doomsdayish. I mean, it is because I go back to it over and over. I mean, a free society is reliant on freedom of the press, freedom of religion. If we don't have these things and we don't actually have unbiased information that's not being driven by market forces and politics, then how do you actually have a free society? You don't. You're a product of the owners of the information
Right.
that are using information as a weapon to achieve whatever end goal they have. And you also don't have people that are able to come together as a society because they're being fractionalized on purpose.
Right. Now, a lot of this shit was going on many, for decades, if not centuries, but nobody talked about it. Right? Sexual harassment, whatever. It's almost like back in the day, we were very good at making sure what it looked like was good, but what it is under the surface was terrible. Now, people are way more willing to talk about what it really is than trying to keep the facade of what it's supposed to look like to upstanding citizens or whatever. Because so many people who are the arbiters of good taste and, of the community ended up being the worst human beings in the world, priests or politicians or, horrible things that were happening in families that nobody spoke of that now people are. So was it that the facade was ripped off of like the horrible chaos of in this country? Is that causing some of this?
I think it's two-pronged. I think it is that the more sophisticated society has become, the more that the excess of power has been accessible. So meaning like back in the day when there were just mobsters and they were all locally owned and operated, yes, bad things were happening, but they couldn't establish a national network or an international network or a global network. And I think some of what's been happening is that as things are becoming less localized and more globalized,
right,
there's the ability for these things to take on a life of their own is not even, I mean, that's not even in the ballpark. It's now the corruption can be so widespread and the power can be so great that there seems to be no way around it. So I think the market forces of this global economy and global economies of scale. And so I think what's really happening is that I'm sure there were corrupt politicians in the past.
Of course.
But was it as integrated into corporate
Every
America
aspect of,
and was corporate America as integrated into the global economy? Because now you have, instead of just having US corporations that are influencing politicians, you have multinational corporations that have arms in China and Russia and Japan and Singapore and Venezuela and Africa. And suddenly you have all of these players that want what they want for the corporation that are influencing American politics. So it's not just America.
So it's globalization and technology and democratization of information that has enabled, any Joe Schmo to be like, I want to get mine too. And some of these people, creating very powerful companies or et cetera, which they never would have had the access or ability really to do. Very few people had the ability to do that from nothing. Let's be honest, even though it's the
No,
land of opportunity. But
no,
now think of all of the people who are just out of nowhere have become millionaires and billionaires just because they had the access to it. So yeah, it's definitely
right.
so
And then
but
that's why you have like the tech censorship issues.
right.
And you also have people that are concerned that, communist China is influencing US media, because why wouldn't you think that?
So how does this get back to Chris Cuomo?
I think it is symbolic of a really big issue in terms of media credibility and abuse of power. And I think that everyone is starting to understand that there's an abuse of power, and it's coming out left and right, right? There's the Me Too movement.
Black
This
Lives
is,
Matter.
I think that people are becoming disillusioned to the idea that, yes, if you have power, you will misuse it. I think as a society, we are going to need to band together to figure out how to untangle ourselves from influence. I think as individuals, we can decide, I'm going to listen to this reporter because I respect them and I know they're independent. And I think it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting as people in the society to unravel from their influence, because they can only have influence over us if we let them. That is just not a simple thing.
No. So should we talk about how vans and the United States Postal Service have
Yeah, that's way more fun.
collaborated?
Let's do something it's way more fun.
So we haven't talked about a kooky mashup for a little while.
We have not.
And I saw this the other day and I was like, I would wear this stuff.
It's cute. It's actually cute.
It's oh my God, cute.
So tell us about the
So
first class kicks.
the US Postal Service and the SoCal skate brand Vans have collaborated and they have come up with clothes and sneakers like sweatshirts and high tops, hoodies with the US mail and the USPS logo on it. It's totally like officially licensed and authentic. The last I read, the Postal Service workers are not yet outfitted with this stuff, but I don't even know if that's only what it's meant for or if it's also meant for selling to the public, because this stuff is
cute.
It really is cool. I'm looking at this one sweatshirt with this big giant US mail patch on the back with the eagle and
it's super
the
cute.
Colors. It's really cool.
Their sneakers are really cute.
It's great PR for the Postal Service, which is in dire need of, a leg up here. And it is great for Vans too. Companies like Vans have clearly been brilliant about their marketing for decades now, and they must hire just super brilliant artists and marketers, etc., to remain relevant for so long. And to take something like the United States Postal Service, like how uncool is that? And this stuff, and it's like hip hop influenced, and it's, to me, I think it's as genius as Gucci.
Wow, that's really saying something. It is really well done. It's perfectly on brand for both brands, which is unusual.
Yes.
So, I feel like it
makes sense for both brands.
Makes sense for both brands, and they both look good doing it.
There's like the knit cap, really the cool. US mail, like it's sort of like the old school logo too that's been around forever. The eagle.
They did a really nice job of paying homage to the actual brand without
and the color selection,
like a fresh little spin on all of it. It's so tastefully done. It's
old
remarkable.
School to me. It resonates with me too, and I'm old, but it reminds me of like stuff. Some of the things I see now, I'm like, oh my God, like I don't even get it. I know I'm not supposed to get it, but I could never wear it. I could wear this stuff.
Yeah.
I might get a sweatshirt or a knit hat with the U. It
sounds like you're going to for sure. Now I know what to get you for Christmas.
I'm looking at all this stuff, sneakers, leather sneakers, officially licensed. It's great. And so
it's cool.
There's a whole old school hip hop thing to it too that I can't like explain in words.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's not Kanye West insanity. It's the old like sort of low key.
Wu-Tang Clan.
Thinking like Run DMC even almost.
Yeah.
And just how much influence that culture has had, and now it's everywhere, right? Everywhere. It's global. I mean, I could go on about this. This isn't about PR necessarily anymore. Although the Jay-Z's of the world, and I'm no fan of his either for other reasons to do with baseball. But anyway, Puff Daddy, all of them, they were genius. I mean, they took this stuff global, man, and they saw what nobody else saw because it was by Black people.
Yeah.
It was dangerous because people didn't understand it because nobody wanted to. And it has changed the world, I think. And now we have it in the U.S. Postal Service.
I also have to point out that the story is from a Substack.
There's a ton of stories on it, but what are you looking at?
Oh, the story that was in our
that I
actually
shared?
it was actually from a Substack newsletter. So
that's hilarious. Well, there you go too, right? And it is about democratizing access to whatever it is.
Information.
Right. Creativity, business opportunities.
I mean, I think it's the linchpin of the future of society. And the same is true in art. If you have too many market forces that are pushing agendas, you can't just have art for the sake of art. I think everybody's starting to get tired of feeling like they know they're being pushed to, and it's something that they're just putting up with. And it's becoming part of the drinking water of society and culture. But then at what point are we going to just tell them to go shove it and find art sources that are independent, even if they're not produced as well? I think the Vans thing is nice in that it feels wholesome in the old school, like this is just two brands getting together to help each other, but not with that kind of weird doing something.
Right. It's not a political agenda. Well, postal workers, it's, especially in New York, they're mostly minorities. It's a job that is going away because they deliver the mail less frequency and post offices are closing and everybody complains how much they suck and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it's disrespecting blue collar workers, all of that yet again. And so to have this, and I have to say, the woman who delivers the mail in my building, she's awesome. And she talks to everybody and she's super nice and outgoing and everything.
Yeah.
She's great. I just feel like there's been a negative against the United States Postal Service. So I feel like this gives a really positive, prideful, sense. And and the people who deliver my mail would love these clothes, I think, and they'd be psyched if this is what they got to wear. I don't know if the US, I mean, it is officially licensed, so I'm imagining they are going to be allowed or maybe even told to wear this stuff. And I think it's cool, so they won't feel like the nerdy jerk in the stupid shorts and the knee socks. They're going to be wearing what they would wear anyway. I love it.
I love it too.
So there is a political thing, but it's not
a little bit. It's not in the same way we're talking about,
right?
Though. It's more true. It's more wholesome and virtuous and
supportive of people who don't usually get a hat tip publicly.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you so much for tuning in for the PR Wind Down podcast.
And thank you to Angela for joining us for a really engaging interview.
She was amazing. Remember, you can submit your own agency stories and questions and share our show with your friends and family and colleagues. Maybe not family, but friends and colleagues. If you subscribe and leave us a rating, also helps us reach new listeners like you.
And if you have an anonymous PR horror story of your own, please send it our way at the contact email below the episode notes.
Can't wait to wind down with you again next time.